FYI, spoilers. I often do reviews, either kind of review, written or spoken, in a sort of, at least somewhat spoiler-free version. But I can't do that with this because I want to talk about what happens. So watch this in a day or two after you go see the movie. I just saw Tim Burton's Dark Shadows, so let's talk about Dark Shadows. Dark Shadows is based on what I've always heard coined the Empire soap opera. There were two versions. I recently watched the first 1.5, I'd say, episodes of the first version on Netflix just because of all the hype for the movie and stuff. And it was paced like really slowly and sort of boring and cheesy, but I mean, to have a show that was about vampires, so many years ago, is probably pretty impressive in itself. Michelle Pfeiffer recently on Leno. Yes, I watched Leno just to see Michelle Pfeiffer. Was talking about how it was like her favorite show and she used to rush home from school to watch it and stuff. So she actually asked Tim Burton to be in the movie, which is pretty awesome. And of course they did Batman Returns together before she was Catwoman. There's been so much talk about this movie. It seems like they were filming it for quite a while, or I was just hearing about it for a long time. There were all these on-set photos of Johnny Depp in the makeup. The really heavy, old-timey vampire makeup. Of course, unflattering, because Johnny Depp likes to unflatter himself. And they would always have Johnny Depp, on some cliff, and of course you're shooting it, and it's in broad daylight, and it looks incredibly ridiculous. And I was like, I don't know if I want to see this movie. This was just going by on-set photos, which of course is like silly. Back in the day, we would hardly ever see those. Maybe in an issue of Interview magazine, we'd see like one on-set photo from something, but I was like deluged with them, so I was like, I don't know. Then they started showing these commercials for it, and I'm like, oh, it's not serious. It's funny. For some reason, I thought it was like going to be like this big dramatic movie. And I'm like, these commercials look really funny. I need to see this movie. There's so much awesome stuff in this movie, and it actually reminded me of a lot of other movies. So I'm thinking if you're the type of person like me who likes those other movies, you'll probably dig this too. For instance, some of the special effects remind me of Death Becomes Her. Giving it away, but there's problems with the witch where she gets in a fight and she's moving her neck and her head and her arms and stuff. Totally remind me of all the Death Becomes Her stuff with their necks. So awesome. You had weird scraping stuff. I can't really put into words how it reminded me of, but there was stuff that reminded me of the movie Hocus Pocus. There's villagers burning down beautiful mansion reminding me of Interview with a Vampire. There's like so many awesome, like a lot of imagery that you can imagine that I think if you're into those other movies, you'd probably love it too. The tagline for the movie was something about all the families are weird or whatever. And it's pretty cool. And the first thing I thought when I was watching it was that the family dynamic of any other movie that I can think of reminded me of the movie Running with Scissors, based on the memoir by Augustin Burroughs, which is a very good book too. But in the movie, they're not actually all family, but they're all in this house together. It's everybody's doing all of their own little crazy stuff, and it's like that in this movie too. It's pretty awesome. Like, you have Michelle Pfeiffer, and she lives there with her brother, who's played by Johnny Lee Miller, who I want to say that they uglied him up for this movie, but he has not been looking his best for a couple years, so I don't know. He's playing a jerk anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter. He has a son who's all upset because his mother died and they can't deal with it, so they've hired a psychologist to come in, and she's been there for years, so she's basically part of the family now. And the psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, whatever kind of shrink, is played by Helena Bonham Carter, and she's fucking awesome. She's like drunk all the time, hungover all the time, popping pills, drinking, and giving like hypnotizing Barnabas Collins, like doing all kinds of shit that's fucking awesome. Like, I don't know, I love her in this movie. And she just like that says like what everybody else is thinking, because of course the thing like sober thoughts or drunk words or however that goes. So she'll just come in and be like, who the fuck is this guy? Where everybody else is kind of like, what's going on? Like when he shows up. I guess I should have said that obviously Barnabas Collins guy is awakened 100 years after he goes out, after he's like put under the spell and stuff. So he comes out in the 70s, which is set in the 70s, so everything looks really cool, and they get to make lots of like 70s references and stuff. But I mean, it was really pretty and cool, and they have hippies and all that stuff, and I still don't think it was overdone. Back to the family stuff. There's a teenage daughter, and she's supposed to be like the hip one who is in with the culture, which totally makes sense because, you know, teenagers are always like obsessed with whatever is the new thing that's happening. Obviously, it's a fish out of water movie because he's woken up way later than he was, which is always fun to watch people like that, or aliens, or anything else when you watch, like when an alien shows up in a movie and they go, ooh, TV, like, this is so cool. There's two really good, like, dirty things that just happen all of a sudden for no reason, which, like, you're like, hey, like, that's cool, that just happened. Like, all of a sudden, like, Helena Bonham Carter, like, gives him a blowjob, and, like, I didn't suspect that. And then there's like, it's supposed to be like a sex scene, but it's more like a dry humping scene with him and like his ex, the witch, and it's like they're like all over the place, knocking walls around and stuff. And it reminds me like more comical version of the scene out of Buffy, if you remember one of the later seasons when she was dating Spike, which was my favorite because torture, love, and all that, and it's wrong. There's so much awesome stuff in this movie. Of course, Helena Bonham Carter's in it because you have the whole Helena Bonham Carter being with Tim Burton, you know, for X amount of years. And then there's Johnny Depp, which I always like to imagine they like have awesome three-ways together in like that castle that Carter and Burton share. What I would call this review is Miss Emma MM's review of Dark Shadows, aka Don't Fuck the Help. Because the whole story is set in motion because you have this guy who's played by Johnny Depp, this Barnabas Collins character, with this family that's built themselves up into be the richest family in the city, or small fishing village that was, I also read was created just for the movie, and then they like torched the village or something. That's pretty interesting. But anyways, you have him, and he's supposed to be young and impetuous and dumb or whatever, so he's fucking one of the maids. Because, you know, people are always fucking their maids back in the day, and it was just totally cool. Well, he ends up falling for this little virginal girl who we don't really see why. It's kind of funny, I just started reading Elizabeth Portell's Bitch, so I guess I'm sort of in like the feminist mind mode, but I'm just thinking like you always have these characters in the movies who are so, their only virtue is seeming virtuous. That's why the guy wants them. They're so cute and unspoiled and all that stuff. Like, you don't really know why he falls for her or whatever. And he decides immediately to stop fucking the maid. And turns out the maid is a witch. So she really does not take kindly to that. Puts his girlfriend under a spell, makes her kill herself. He tries to follow her and kill himself. And she turns him into a vampire, which I'm not going to nitpick stuff in this, like witches turn people into vampires, or there was a couple other things that seemed odd, but it's not like it's their movie. Like, they can create whatever kind of world they want. The point is, I don't know, it sort of bothered me during the movie how, I mean, the girl was evil, no doubt, you know, fucking killing people and controlling them and all this stuff, but in reality you have a character who is the little meek maid who works for this rich family and ends up taking over the entire town. And she's still in love with this guy who doesn't love her, and we all know about that. We all know that everybody wants who they can't have. And you can't make somebody love you. But, I mean, is it really ridiculous of her to have done that to him in the first place, considering, like, the shitty way that he treated her? I don't think so. And then, like, repeatedly, there's just stuff over and over, like, where he's, like, calling her all these names, and, like, you're such a piece of basically, you're a piece of shit, you know, but in olden terms, so it's awesome. And it's just like, yeah, she is evil, but he's totally evil, and they do show that he's evil and kills people. They don't try to, like, whitewash it like he's a vampire and he doesn't have to eat anybody. Sometimes he apologizes for it. Okay, all of that being said about how Barnabas Collins is most definitely not a feminist. I felt like it was like a feminist movie. Even whenever they hire the girl to be the nanny, they say to her, as one of the questions Michelle Pfeiffer asks is, do you think the sexes should be equal? And she says, heavens no, men would become unmanageable, which is both funny And it just shows, like, you know, this is a woman-run household. The psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, Helena Bonham Carter, she's a woman, which is would actually be more unusual back in the 60s and 70s still, even more from Barnabas Collins' time. I also wanted to mention that I don't think the character himself is sexy, and he's not as, even though he has the vampire illusion thing going where you can trick people, it's just because Johnny Depp's playing it. Because, like, all the women are, like, falling all over themselves for him, and I don't think it would be if it was somebody else. Whenever he falls for the new girl, it does have a little bit of a character story. She's troubled and everything. She is her own character. But given I did go to the restroom during part of that because I thought it was sappy. But, it seems more like, oh, he just likes her because she looks like his ex, which is stupid. I love this movie. I would give it a 4 out of 5, maybe even a 5 later after I've watched it more times. I plan on seeing it again, and I think all the hate is, I don't know. When I started recording this, I didn't know there was hate, but apparently there's hate and people don't like it. Maybe it wasn't marketed exactly correctly or whatever, but it's awesome and I liked it, and I do think it was better than Alice in Wonderland, which I also liked, but I didn't like love. Like, I love the visuals, but I didn't love the movie. Yes, go see Dark Shadows. Do not let it make like $5. Thank you. Addendum. I realized this video was somewhat choppy and even less linear than how I usually speak or write, but I didn't have the forethought to charge my battery or make sure I had the right SD card in, so I had to record this at 3 different times. So that's the explanation.